Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Eric Rieger, and welcome to another episode of Tempered Leadership. Today, I am joined by Dr. Neeraj Khanna, who is the author of the book Functional Aesthetic Dentistry. Neeraj, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here with you.
Is it really?
I have to say,
We want to set the tone right off the bat. Neeraj and I have known each other for about a decade now?
13 years to be exact.
Okay, a baker's dozen is what I was going to say. We'll edit that out.
The 13th year is free.
And we met at, what was it, a gym? Weightlifting?
Yeah, we met at a fitness club. And if I can just start the conversation, Eric, if you don't mind. So Eric walks in with the Chicago Blackhawks bag. He's got his clothes in there and whatever, paraphernalia, whatever. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, I need to meet this guy. I had no idea who Eric was, what he did for a living. He had me at hockey, and because I'm a huge hockey fan too. And so when you meet someone who loves hockey, you got to talk. And so
absolutely. Hockey brings the world together.
Yes, it does.
If everybody was a hockey fan, we wouldn't have these problems we have in the world today. There'd probably be a lot more work for you because there'd be a lot more teeth that need to be fixed.
So we need all of our leaders to play hockey.
I think pretty much we summed up the point of this podcast. We're done.
I think we're done. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, Neeraj and I have had a really good relationship, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on the show, in addition to being an author and a very successful dentist, you also are an educator, and you and I have had very similar paths in our career development and leadership, and we've shared some of the struggles we've had, some of the successes we've had. We have a very close relationship. We have dinner frequently, and so I think some of the things that we've learned as we've grown as leaders are useful to the people that are listening here. Talk a little bit about how, first of all, just how you got started in dentistry. What was it that, because that's a serving profession. You like the way you approach just your craft. You have a very servant leader's heart, and I'll share some experience of why I think dentistry in itself is not given as much credit as is in the healthcare profession. Is it's so important to the overall health picture. But what was it that drove you to become not just a dentist, but a healthcare professional who's really concerned with people's well-being?
So it's a very long story, Eric. So how much time do we have?
We have 30 minutes, so give us the Reader's Digest version.
That's the only question we talk about. That'll take up the 30. So I knew I'd wanted to become a dentist since high school. And long story short, in my yearbook, that you get your picture put at the end of the book, and then they tell you a little bit about yourself, and then they tell you, what do you want to do when you grow up, right? And I just said I want to be a dentist. And so I knew the path, and don't ask me how I knew. I honestly don't know. That was something I just felt right about. Went to undergraduate at the University of Toronto, and in the back of my mind, that's all that mattered, is that I needed to focus on achieving that goal, is becoming a dentist. And a lot of the friends I knew at the time were applying to all kinds of schools, whatever they could get into. And so I put all my eggs in dentistry, and fortunately I was fortunate enough to get into a great program. But the development of my passion didn't come until way into my career. And so, like most professionals, you graduate school, you feel like you finally have a purpose, you need experience. And then as the experience continues, you feel like there's something more here than just doing what I'm doing. And I reached that point 5 years after I opened my practice. And if you want, I can continue, but that's the journey that's happened up until then.
Well, it's for me, I mean, I've had experience, our business deals with a lot of healthcare professionals. My background was in medical manufacturing and healthcare software. So I've been around healthcare professionals most of my professional career. And one thing that really stood out about you and the way you operate in contrast to some of the other people that I've known and providers I've gone to myself, is that, I think there's a perception out there that, the dental aspect of it isn't really as big of a deal as it really is in terms of the whole, function of the human body. And as I've gotten to know you and how you practice medicine, people that I know have gone to you they've seen other providers and the providers can't diagnose the problem. They create anxiety. They're not looking at the whole system. And to me, there's like a leadership quality there of, being able to calm the patient down and really just dive into the system as a whole and, figure that out. And why do you think that is in terms of how dentistry is perceived and why it doesn't get the credit? I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't get the credit it deserves in the whole picture of health.
So it's a great question. And this is the kind of question I have to face every day, because when I see a patient, one of the questions that I ask them is, tell me about your past experience with whoever was taking care of you. And did they talk about this? Did they explain this? And in most cases, the answer is no. And so the perception, unfortunately, with our profession sometimes is the emphasis is not necessarily focused on the well-being of the entire patient. It's mostly focused on the well-being of a few teeth, an area in the mouth, for example. And to be honest with your viewers, I used to be that type of dentist a long time ago, because that's all we knew. And that's what we're taught in school. And that's the interesting about professional school, is that their obligation to the students is to provide them with enough information so they can pass the board exam. And you can say that with any profession.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's what accredited schools are supposed to do. They're supposed to provide you with enough knowledge and skill that you can take that knowledge and pass a board, and then finally use that skill in the real world. And in the real world dentistry, that's the disconnect that frustrates me. And at the same time, it motivates me to help as many dentists as I can, because they're not seeing it from a perspective that makes more sense. They're just so focused on certain areas of the mouth that they need to take a step back. And so to answer your question about medicine, for example, periodontal disease used to be thought of as just a mouth disease. It has been proven in the literature, in the medical literature, that it is a systemic disease now. And so if a patient has a disease, then it needs to be treated. I know orthopedic surgeons, cardiothoracic surgeons will not do procedures unless the mouth is healthy. So the awareness is out there, Eric. The choice lays on the dentist, is how they choose the path they choose. How do they choose to treat the patients they want to treat?
And that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk to you about when we're looking at from an education perspective, because not only do you have your practice, but you also have an education component where you teach. And I've had the pleasure of actually sitting in and watching, one of your sessions. And, you were worried that I was going to be bored out of my mind because, I'm obviously not in the dental profession per se. And I found it fascinating. I like to people watch, and, everybody in the room was riveted in your style because there's a genuine sense of caring. And this is, to me, like one of the ultimate characteristics of a good leader, is that you're trying to bring everybody along and you're trying to build more leaders. And to me, that's the number one job of a leader, is build more leaders. What was it about that? I mean, you're so good at it. And I think that comes from just a genuine passion for it. But was it really kind of what you saw in your industry that motivated you to want to go out and educate as many people as you can about what you feel is the right way to go about practicing medicine?
That's partly true, Eric. The truth is this, that in the beginning, when I was learning this process, I didn't feel confident in this process. And it takes time. It takes years of practice to develop the confidence. And then you ask yourself, what's left to do? And you get to a point in your life and your career where you say, what is your legacy, right? And your legacy has a lot to do with your family, your children, if you have any. But then outside of that realm, it's your business and what you leave behind. And one of the things that struck me was that in the beginning, I realized that so many people were engaged in what I had to say. I started realizing that my message and the way I deliver that message was resonating. And that in itself was motivating for me to continue and do more. And then you develop your style, and then you develop your way of um, delivering the message, essentially. And it's not about taking a slide and throwing it on the screen and expecting someone to follow. It's really engaging them in the thought process. And that's something that I've worked really hard to doing. And part of my legacy, Eric, is to help as many dentists around the world and whoever's willing to listen.
That's huge, because I've, in my travels and going to so many conferences and presentations, and you get speakers up there, and it's really just regurgitating PowerPoints, and nothing disconnects with an audience quicker than just somebody reading to you from the screen. And, again, having experienced what you do firsthand, you genuinely make a connection with almost everybody that's in the audience. I mean, it's almost impossible to connect with every single person, especially as the audience gets bigger, but you certainly make an attempt to make sure there's no student left behind. Even the ones that are having trouble grasping concepts, the patience you show, the empathy, the concern, that's leadership to me. And it's a gift, and I wish more speakers had it. I wish more educators had it. We could probably do a whole nother show on the education system here in the United States. And like you said, they're preparing people functionally to do a job, but they're kind of disconnected from the why. And it's a shame, because there's a lot of good people out there, and they're kind of disconnected from purpose.
And Eric, I found the why. It took me a long time, and it wasn't until 2006 where I found the why. And I had a mentor that inspired me to follow this path, and his name was Dr. Peter Dawson. And when I first saw him speak, and if you don't mind me sharing this experience, because this
Sure.
really transformed me into the person I am today. I was in a room of 300 people, and I really honestly felt I had a moment, an epiphany, where he was only speaking to me. And it was extremely powerful, Eric. It was just life-changing. And I knew at that time I had to do two things. I had to master this process. And number two, I had to do something with it. At the time, I didn't know it was going to be this path, but I knew this was my calling. And so I want others to experience the same feeling I had that day. And the only way I can have that happen is to inspire others. And I can't expect to inspire everyone in the audience, but there's going to be one or two people that will kind of relate to more so with what we're talking about. And that's been my why, is just that. I want people to experience the same thing I experienced, because it truly is remarkable. And people have had similar experiences in other situations, but when it comes to this part, this has been my epiphany.
And there's a common thread with everybody I've had on the show so far, which I think is probably characteristic of, leaders who have advanced to that stage. Is there's been this moment where there's a realization of, I'm not the person I need to be. And typically there's a mentor, or there's some, life altering moment that happens where a light bulb goes off, or a realization of, I'm not the person that, the people that I lead, or the people that are counting on me need me to be. And there's this inherent desire to change and to grow and to learn and to absorb. And that's a common trait now I'm seeing from everybody that's been gracious enough to be on the show, is, they're vulnerable of that moment where there's a realization, I'm nowhere near capable. And you and I and some of the other guests have been fortunate to have those mentors, which is why I have so much respect for what you're doing, for you as a person, and for what you're doing from the education standpoint, because you're trying to light that fire or have that light switch go off for at least one person in the room. And that's a gift. I mean, that's part of leaders building other leaders.
It is truly incredible to have a feeling like that, Eric, when you're able to connect with someone. You've had your connections too. I know you have. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to give it back. You know, you can take so much, but then eventually you're going to accumulate so much. And then what are you going to do with it? You've got to give it back. You have to inspire others. And I know for a fact there's been statistics out there that 85% of leaders have been inspired by someone else. 5% are naturally born, and the other 10%, it's based on a specific circumstance that they become leaders. And so what you're saying is correct, that to make the world a better place, we have to make it happen, because we are the 85%.
Now so more than ever.
Sorry?
I said now more than ever, especially in the world that we're living in today, cutting through the noise and getting people to, you know, think for themselves again. And yeah, there's an inherent need for more people, I guess, like us. It's a revolution.
So I'll keep doing this as long as I can. And I can't wait. I don't think I could ever leave dentistry. Honestly, I just don't know what I would do without either teaching or practicing or doing something in that respect. So I know what my purpose is. I know what my why is, and my purpose now is to do it as long as I physically can. Absolutely.
And I'll say again from firsthand experience, you know, coming to you as a patient, you know, the whole experience of, you know, taking the whole body into consideration, because I've shared with you the journey that I've been on with my personal physical and mental health, you know, challenges and changes. And, you know, now we're looking at things from an oral health perspective that, you know, potentially could have impact on, you know, long-term health. And the way you're describing things to me, no one's ever really taken the time. And that's another thing that's lost, I think, kind of in healthcare. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where my doctor, my family doctor, is a concierge medicine, right? So I pay a fee to be in the practice so that he has time to see me, because when you're in the healthcare system and the insurance is driving a lot of that, then it's you know, churn them in and churn them out as quickly as possible. How can you possibly care for people? And I had one of my previous doctors, I had almost an argument of, you know, like, you're not even listening to me. It's like you're almost on the next patient already. Like your mind is already with, you know, down the list. I got to see all these people. I said, as a doctor, as somebody who swore, you know, the oath to do no harm, how can you sit here and rush me in and out? And he's like, well, it's the system. And I'm trying to fight the system, but you don't understand how big the system is. And that's where, as leaders, you know, we're like, I fight the system constantly. I mean, I can be a real bear to deal with sometimes when I feel there's an injustice being done to the people that you're supposed to be serving. And, you know, again, that's where our connection comes in, is I see that in you every time I visit. And also when I watch you teach or, you know, talk to people who have gone to see you or your staff. It's really just the way things should be, in my opinion.
I'll share something with you. You brought up a very good point, because a lot of dentists that I've taught along the way, one of their most common questions is, how do I slow down? Because this philosophy really teaches you to be more comprehensive. And in order to do it well, you have to slow down. And what is the biggest hurdle? It's financial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm seeing, you know, 50, 60, 70 new patients a month, how do I slow down? I'm just too busy. And this is one of the biggest challenges that faces our healthcare system, is that volume seems to be a sign of success, right? We are here to serve. We are not treating animals. You know, we're not herding cattle. We're not farmers in that respect, not to disrespect animals, but we are in the profession of healthcare. And medicine is no different, by the way. We're not talking about just dentistry, but healthcare in general is just that. You can say that there are powers that are beyond our control, that are certainly dictating a lot of the forces involved. But ultimately, it's like this. Um, you and I get to choose what we eat every day. No one can force us to eat whatever we don't want. We have that choice. We have the power to decide what we want to eat. After that, we don't really have much left, to tell you the truth. But that's a choice we still make. And I think clinicians who want to be successful in a different way, bringing high quality care back to the practice, you cannot do that without spending time. And in order for you to do that, you have to take a risk. You have to take a chance. But is your vision aligned with that process? And that is what I hear so much, Eric, is that they're not willing to give up the volume, but they're willing to change the vision. And you just can't do both. And that's what they don't understand, is that if you change the vision, you change the model. You can't keep the old model and try a different vision. It's oil and water. It will never work.
They're incompatible.
When I had my epiphany, one of the first things I did was I came back to the office that Monday morning and I told the team, this is how we're going to change. I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to implement this, because that's something that's going to be in the works. And so it took a few years, Eric, to figure this out. And once we found our path, it just got a little bit easier, and we started to see the results. We started to see the appreciation, and that in itself, that emotional connection started resonating with the team. They started believing, they started seeing the value. And to be honest with you, they enjoyed it more because they're not, running around with their heads cut off. And so the whole culture of the practice has changed. It's not just the way we care for our patients, but it's the whole culture, which is incredible.
Well, that's another great point, because 2020 has been a year unlike any other for everybody I know who's in business. How has you've worked so hard on this culture, and then bam, the pandemic hits, and you're basically forced to shut your business down. Right. And this is the stuff of leadership nightmares. Where you because you wear the crown, you get to make all the tough choices. So, talk a little bit about how the pandemic has challenged, the culture, and what you're doing to stay sane through this and lead people, because if you're panicked, they're panicked. And so how do you deal with a situation like this personally?
Well, so when we had to make the decision to shut down, and that was towards the middle of March of this year. And at the time, the team looked at me as to what's our next step. And I had to be honest. I said, I have no idea, but give me some time. And we basically strategized a place where we would meet once a week on Zoom, and I would update them on the latest information. And so my job now became something different. But I wanted them to know that I'm still your leader. Just because we've closed our doors doesn't mean I'll see you in 10 weeks. And so I had to keep the cohesiveness together during that pandemic period, because the information that we were being bombarded with was insane, and there was no clarity. My job now became to create clarity for my team, to filter out the noise and deal with facts and deal with what's really going on and what are we going to do when we are ready to do this. And so that in itself really helped keep the morale at a level where it was sustainable, because I've heard stories where people just disappeared. Staff members never came back. They didn't want to come back. They felt they were never connected during this part, and their leaders basically abandoned them emotionally, not physically, emotionally. And I wanted to make sure I kept that emotional connection with them. I wanted to know how they were doing as well, Eric. It wasn't about the business. It was more like, tell me how you're dealing with things. Creating an environment where, even though we're not together as a team, but I'm there with you emotionally. And I want to make sure that you're still okay. And if you're not okay, what can I do to help to make things better? Yes, you're not earning money, you're on unemployment, but that doesn't mean we can't be there for each other. And so I made that message very clear that we're all in this together. We're all in it together. We're here for each other. And whatever we need from each other, we ask. And that's all it is. And so what I decided to do during that time of closure was we remodeled our practice, because we had no patients in the practice. And I thought, what a great time to do it. It was way overdue. And I thought this would be a great way for the team to work on something while they weren't here. And so this was a group decision. We made decisions together. It became a project that we all participated with, and they had a say in all the decisions. So they felt like they contributed to something important to them. And that affected the morale in a positive way. And then when it came back to reopening, they really looked forward to it. They were excited again. And we had our plans in place, we had our protocols in place, and we committed to everything that we agreed upon. And I felt that was a restart. I felt that that was a reset button for us as a team. It's like we started over, but we started in a very positive feeling. And everyone came back to work. Everyone felt rejuvenated. We missed our patients dearly. We missed each other dearly. And it just felt so good to be together again. It really did.
Yeah, it was nice to come in and see all the transformation of the practice, the physical changes that you made to the office. And I have to tell you, the disco balls above the operatory chairs, beautiful touch. I mean, that's why we have to wear the sunglasses, because of all the sparkly lights. But
Eric, that was your idea. I'm glad we listened to you.
well, that's your first mistake, listening to me for anything, and coming on this show and telling everybody that you listen to me. That's going to do some damage. But we'll, like everything, we'll recover. But what I, in seriousness, what I hear from you in when this pandemic hit is, you showed vulnerability that, hey, I don't have all the answers. And, that's, again, the job of the leader is not to have every single answer. And it's okay to be transparent and say, I don't, but also then reassure and comfort that, I don't have it today, but we'll figure it out. And that's kind of, the same path that I took when, because I have no medical training. So, I have to rely on information I get from other sources. It was real evident early on that the news was not going to be any type of help. The government wasn't going to be any help, because depending on what channel or what source you got information from, it was completely contradictory. And, wear masks, don't wear masks, social distance, it doesn't matter. It's airborne, it's not airborne. And so the first thing I did was shut that all out and then start turning to people that I knew, from our connections in healthcare. I started calling friends that are ICU nurses. What are you seeing? What are the doctors, talking about there? What is the staff preparing for? Are you seeing influx of patients? Do they think this is going to be like the 1918 pandemic? Those just asking questions and becoming as much of a sponge to educate myself in layman's terms. Obviously I didn't need the mechanics of how the virus acted, and, just tell me enough to keep my people safe, and then make the decisions together as a team and communicate with our patients or with our clients. And, one of the first things we did was pull people out of the field about 7 weeks before this really got to be an issue. And, to our credit, with the relationships we have with our clients, they were understanding. And a lot of them were like, it's good to hear you're taking a thought leader position on this. And I'm like, inside, I'm just as scared as everybody else, because I mean, in my lifetime, in your lifetime as well, I don't think we've ever had a challenge of this magnitude that's had this far-reaching impact around the world. So banding together and trying to sort out the noise from the true information, I think that it was the only real path. And then just doing everything I could to maintain my own personal health and sanity. Because if you look like you're scared, it's like they said, if the general's in the tent crying, nobody really wants to go to war with the general who's crying. So, that was, I think, important step that you took. And, same for us. That's just the things you have to do when you're in charge.
I will say this. I think how a leader responds to a situation can do a lot for the team, good and bad. And,
Yes.
My father used to tell me this, even till today. He'll say, you can be the best friends with someone. You can get along with someone all you want, but the moment you disagree with someone, that's when you really know them, right? And
Right.
that's something for leadership, is that the moment something changes and that leader is faced with either a tough decision or a tough situation or making a decision that might impact someone else's life, that's where you truly test your skills as a leadership. And here's the reality, and I will say this with no disrespect to my profession, but dentists are not good leaders in general. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but what I mean is we're not teaching them the skills, even after dental school, to become not great leaders, but effective leaders. And this is something that really concerns me, because when I teach Peter Dawson's philosophy, one of the biggest challenges they have is taking the information and then going back to their office and becoming the leaders to tell their staff, I want to try to change the way we practice, for example, or I want to implement something. And lo and behold, the staff takes over eventually and they take out that energy away from the doctor. And it's something that happens more often than you think. And so, I'm going off tangent again, but that's to me an important characteristic of a leader, is that a situation like this could happen. We had a recession in 2008, Eric, as you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Another situation where it impacted the world. Another situation where it impacted a lot of businesses. Nothing like this, of course, but again, circumstances happened. It was beyond our control, and we have to adjust and deal and somehow find a way to get through it. There'll be others too, Eric, in the future. And again, history repeats itself. We don't know what the next major issue may be. It could be war. It could be another virus. It could be another economic meltdown. We could be visited by aliens. Who knows? But nevertheless, life is an ongoing changing process, but people need people to look up to. I mean, your staff members in any business, they want to be successful for you. They're generally good people. They want to be successful. They just need to be told how to do it and what to do with. And that's it. They will support you 1,000%. You just have to give them the tools and the encouragement and the acknowledgement to succeed. A lot of people think, well, I have to succeed, and if I succeed, my staff succeeds. No, it's the other way around. Being a great leader is to quietly motivate and inspire your team to become successful. And then the rest takes care of itself, Eric. You know this, and you believe in that too.
Well, it's interesting because one of the conferences I was just at last week, it's, of course, everything's virtual, but they had Patty McCord on, who helped build Netflix into the company that it became, and she wrote a book about it, and in her book, she mentions that there's really three things that people want from their place of employment. They want high-performing colleagues, they want a clear purpose, and then well-understood deliverables. And if you can, as a leader, provide those three things, you're setting people up to have ultimate success. And you're building other leaders as you do that. It's that whole quote unquote A players want to be around A players, and she talks about that in the book. About she hates the term A players because somebody's quote unquote A player at one organization might be an F player somewhere else. It's not the person, it's just the environment they're in suited to their beliefs and their skills. And then are you setting them up for success with those three things?
Exactly. And guess who sets up the environment? The leader.
Oh, is that what we do? Now you tell me. Is that in your book here somewhere?
The light bulb just went on. I see the brightness behind you.
No, that's just the lighting of the studio.
That's part of the vision, Eric. That encompasses many things, but it encompasses the vision. I find it interesting that when dentists ask me, well, how do I explain this to my staff? And I said, well, you have a choice. You can just tell them, like most dentists do. They just tell their staff, this is the way we're going to do it. Or you could explain to them what it means to you, how it makes you feel, and how it's going to make them feel when they understand this process, or any process for that matter. And so there's always two ways of looking at things, and that's the inspirational aspect of that. You can you can tell someone what to do, but if you can inspire them to do something, that person is going to want more, because that's addictive. That creates adrenaline. That creates a want, a desire to be successful. And that, I think, is lacking in our profession. Because dentistry is thought of as you're in the trenches. You know, you're in the trenches and nobody knows what it's like to be in the trenches. And there's some separation of what goes on in the trenches and what goes outside the trenches, which is what happens in the rest of the office. And so I think dentists need to get out of their own trenches and allow their team to be part of the trench work.
I think that's a key point you touched on is, a lot of the schools that teach, the doctors, the medical side of it, the functional medical side of it. There's not a lot in terms of leadership or business training or any of that acumen. And then they're out there with this, they're trying to have this ultimate confidence, because in some cases you're dealing with life and death, depending on whether you perform, or recommend or diagnose the right things. And so there's that whole confidence aspect of it, always needing to be right. And that's not a great characteristic for a leader. So they're kind of almost diametrically opposed sometimes, and there's a lot of good books, like the Checklist Manifesto is another one that I really like. And that changed healthcare quite a bit in terms of just, making sure the doctor washed the hands and that the nurses could stop a procedure. Before that was unheard of, because who are these lowly nurses to tell a doctor? And it's like, okay, well, if you don't wash your hands, how good of a doctor are you, right? So that's, I think, something, going back to the education piece is, teaching people how to be leaders, building other leaders, which is what you're trying to do with your education piece. I think that's sorely missing in our education system as a whole. I mean, you don't even have to look at healthcare. You see that in a lot of areas. People get MBAs and they just don't know how to interact with humans. And really, it's all, you said it perfectly. You've got this shutdown, and your first thought was, how are you doing? How can I help you? And, that's having empathy, that's caring about the people in your charge. And that's the most important thing a leader can do. And we're just not teaching enough people. Kind of why I started this podcast was to really share these experiences and help other people on the journey get that into their head really quick, of that being a major piece of this leadership puzzle.
And that example that you used, Eric, is really what it comes down to, is creating a safe environment for your team, that they feel safe, that they can share their concerns. Perhaps, one of your team members isn't performing at their best. And it's very easy to look into that and say, well, if you don't do better, we don't need you, for example, or we'll change your position, or we'll do something else. We need to know more about what's going on. And that's where I have really worked hard on helping dentists understand the emotional component of how to motivate your team. Because I've realized over the years that the emotional well-being has a lot to do with how people deal with things and react, and how things are motivated, and how people are motivated. That emotional component is so critical. And one of the things I do talk about is the concept of listening to your patient's emotions. And what that means is listen to what they're feeling rather than just listen to what they're saying. And that requires peeling the onions. That requires peeling the layers, so to speak, and really finding out the core component as to why they feel a certain way. And that principle can also be applied to your team members as a leader, that if they're not performing at a certain level, well, then find out why. Are you okay, for example? Or is there something going on in your life that's preventing you from doing your job well? Or is there something here that is not conducive for you to do something even better? And so I've learned that the hard way, Eric, because I'm a D on the personality profile. I'm a driver. I'm a results-oriented person. And so for me, I have to remember that I don't expect someone else to behave in that way, but I need to take a step back and realize, okay, there's something else happening here. I just need to ask the right questions first. and let that person open up first. And that took me a long time to understand it and then actually make that part of my daily life.
That's a real, understanding how you're wired is a big piece of the puzzle and how you lead other people. Because if you don't know your shortcomings or the things that could potentially set you on a wrong path, it's hard to help others in that regard. So, kudos to you for figuring that piece. That's part of that epiphany moment that we're talking about. There's a series of things. It's like once you realize you've got to become a better person, it's like, like you said, the onion, how many layers do we have to peel back? And, I guess I should apologize for when I come in there, you're talking about the emotional onion. Like, it's no wonder you spend so much time with me. There's a big onion there to peel.
Well, I'm still trying to get the first layer out.
Well, that's look at it as job security.
All right, fair enough.
All right. Well, this half hour flew by pretty quickly, like I told you it would. So is there, I have no idea. The podcast has already been listened to in 3 or 4 countries. So obviously, you are, in my opinion, you're worth flying in from anywhere in the world to visit. But what's your website and what's your phone number if people want to get a hold of you, either for some dental work or from maybe some education perspective?
The website is www.genevacosmeticdentistry.com. The email, you can contact our office at, you want me to give the phone number? Or
sure.
Yeah, the area code is 630-845-1088. I can leave an email, Eric, if that's okay too, or?
Yeah, let's give people choices. Why not?
Sure. Dr. Khanna at genevasmiles.com is the email address. And so whoever is out there and whoever is listening or watching, if any of this resonates with you, please reach out to me or reach out to Eric, or I'd love to find out more about what you're struggling with or what your successes are. And I would love to hear from anybody who's interested.
As always, you're a gracious guest. You're a gracious human being. And for those who are in the dental profession, the book is Functional Aesthetic Dentistry. I don't think it's for the common folk. You wrote this specifically for your industry, but I'm really proud of you for putting the time in. I know this was a labor of love for you, and this didn't happen overnight. So I'm partly jealous that your book came out before mine did. We're still working on it on this side, but I also have a bone to pick to you that still isn't signed. So the next time I come in, I'm bringing it with me, and you're not doing anything until you sign this copy.
Fair enough. I'll be happy and honored to do that for you, Eric. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share some of things that are very dear to me and very passionate to me. And I'd love to come back whenever you invite me back. I'd love to join in again anytime.
I'm sure we'll be doing this quite a bit over the next few years. So start thinking and obsessing about our next topics. And I'm sure there'll be a few dinners in our future. We'll figure out how we can share our wisdom.
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you. This is Neeraj Khanna from Khanna Dentistry out in Geneva, Illinois. Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, thank you for sticking with us. We hope you got some nuggets out of this. Stay well, and we will see you next time. Thank you.